Hello everyone, and welcome back to another tale of the strange and unexplained. You've all heard stories about families calling in priests to bless a new home, or even hiring exorcists to deal with a troublesome spirit. But have you ever heard of a ghost who desperately wanted his tenants out? And the reason why? Well, that's where this story gets truly bizarre, and honestly, a little hilarious. This wasn't a case of a malevolent spirit seeking to torment the living. No, this ghost had some very specific, very modern complaints. His name, or what he remembered of it, was Arthur Pumble. He'd been a resident of his quaint little house for over 80 years, 60 of those as a ghost. He was a creature of habit, enjoying the quiet creaks of the old floorboards and the gentle rustle of leaves outside his window. His afterlife was, for the most part, peaceful, until the Millers moved in. The Miller family was vibrant, too vibrant for Arthur's taste. The father, a man with a laugh that could shake the rafters, had a habit of stomping through the house as if he were trying to find a hidden basement. The mother was an aspiring chef, which sounded lovely, except her culinary experiments often ended with the smoke alarm shrieking for mercy and a lingering smell of burnt garlic that clung to the curtains for days. The two younger children treated the hallway as their personal bowling alley, but the absolute worst offender, the bane of Arthur's spectral existence, was the eldest son, Brad. Brad was a teenager with a passion for music, a very loud, very specific, and in Arthur's opinion, very terrible genre of music. From morning till night, the house would throb with heavy bass lines and incomprehensible lyrics. But it wasn't just the music. Oh no, Brad was a singer. Or rather, he thought he was. He would sing along to every song, his voice a unique blend of a startled cat and a malfunctioning foghorn. Arthur, who had appreciated the subtle harmonies of a good waltz in his day, found this auditory assault to be a form of torture worse than any clanking chain or ghostly wail. But the noise, as unbearable as it was, wasn't even the ghost's biggest problem. His number one complaint, the thing that truly pushed him over the edge, was the smell. According to Arthur, the Millers had a collective aversion to basic hygiene. He swore Brad hadn't seen the inside of a shower in a week, and the entire family seemed to exude an aroma of stale pizza and unwashed laundry. For a spirit who prided himself on the faint, distinguished scent of old books and dried lavender, this was an olfactory nightmare. The house he had lovingly cared for, both in life and death, now reeked. So, what's a sophisticated, peace-loving ghost to do when his home is invaded by a family of loud, smelly tenants? Forget rattling chains or spooky apparitions. Arthur was a modern ghost with a modern problem, and he needed a modern solution. He decided he had to get them out, legally. He needed to sell the house. But how does a ghost, an incorporeal being with no bank account and no social security number, hire a realtor? This is where our story takes another strange turn. Arthur began his quest by focusing his energy. He started small, trying to manipulate the household computer. After weeks of intense concentration, he managed to type a single, wobbly H into the search bar. It was exhausting. He realized he needed help, but the living couldn't see him. Then he remembered Mrs. Gable, the psychic medium who lived 2 towns over. She wasn't one of those fakes you see on TV. She was the real deal, a woman who could genuinely communicate with the other side. Arthur spent the next few nights projecting his thoughts, sending out a spectral SOS to Mrs. Gable. Help, he'd whisper into the ether. Smelly tenants, ... terrible music. Need a realtor. Finally, one evening, as Brad was attempting a particularly high note that sounded like a blender full of rocks, Arthur felt a connection. A calm, gentle voice echoed in his non-existent mind. Hello, is someone there? You seem very distressed. It was Mrs. Gable. Arthur poured out his frustrations. He described the noise, the smells, the sheer disrespect for his quiet home. Mrs. Gable, who had heard her fair share of ghostly grievances, had to admit this was a first. She'd dealt with vengeful spirits and lost souls, but never one who just wanted to evict his tenants for being bad neighbors. Sympathetic to his plight, she agreed to act as his intermediary. The next day, Mrs. Gable called a local real estate agency, Prestige Properties, she explained, in the most delicate terms possible, that her client, a Mr. Arthur Pumble, wished to sell his house. The agent on the phone, a young, ambitious man named Kevin, was a bit confused. Mr. Pumble, but the public record shows he passed away 60 years ago. Mrs. Gable, ever the professional, simply replied, yes, that's correct. It's a posthumous sale. He's very motivated to sell. He has some difficult tenants he'd like to see gone. Kevin, thinking it was some eccentric relative handling an estate, agreed to a meeting at the property. The day he arrived, Mrs. Gable was there to greet him. The house was, as usual, a cacophony of noise and smells. As Kevin walked through the living room, he wrinkled his nose. Wow, it sure has a lived-in smell, doesn't it? From the corner of the room, a vase of flowers suddenly wobbled and fell over. Kevin jumped. Whoa, weird draft. Mrs. Gable just smiled knowingly. Arthur agrees with you, she whispered. The for sale sign went up a week later, much to the confusion of the Miller family. Who's selling the house? Mr. Miller bellowed. We have a lease. They tried calling their landlord, a property management company that had inherited the house, but they were just as confused. They had no record of putting the house on the market. But the listing was real, and soon, prospective buyers started to arrive. This is when Arthur truly shined. He became the world's best and spookiest staging assistant. When a nice, quiet-looking couple came to view the house, the strange smells would miraculously vanish, replaced by the scent of baking bread or fresh flowers. A soft, pleasant breeze would drift through the rooms. When a loud, boisterous family with 3 teenagers showed up, however, the house would suddenly develop a mysterious, unpleasant odor. The faucets would drip a rusty-looking liquid, and faint, unsettling whispers would seem to come from the walls. The Millers were oblivious, blaming the weird occurrences on old house problems. But Kevin, the realtor, was starting to notice a pattern. The house seemed to have a personality of its own, actively helping or hindering his sales pitches depending on the client. He mentioned this to Mrs. Gable, who simply patted his arm and said, Arthur is very particular about who he wants as his next housemates. Finally, the perfect buyer arrived. It was a retired librarian named Eleanor Vance. She was a quiet, gentle woman who spoke in soft tones and loved to read. As she walked through the house, Arthur was on his best behavior. Sunlight streamed through the windows, the old floorboards were silent, and the air smelled faintly of vanilla and old paper, Arthur's favorite combination. Eleanor fell in love with the place instantly. It just has such a peaceful feeling, she told Kevin. She put in an offer that very day. The legal paperwork was a nightmare to sort out, involving dusty deeds and obscure inheritance laws, but with Mrs. Gable's help, the sale eventually went through. The Millers were given their notice. On moving day they were as loud and messy as ever, leaving behind pizza boxes and a trail of chaos. As their van finally pulled away, a final, screeching vocal run from Brad echoing down the street, a profound silence fell over the house. Arthur let out a spectral sigh of relief. Peace at last. A few weeks later, Eleanor moved in. She unpacked her books, setting them up on the shelves with care. She played classical music softly on a small radio in the evenings, and spent her afternoons reading in a comfortable armchair. The house was quiet, clean, and smelled of lemon polish and tea. Arthur was content. He had his home back. And he proved that sometimes, the most terrifying thing about a ghost isn't a spooky noise or a floating object, it's their impeccable taste and their desperate need for a little peace and quiet. So, the next time you hear a strange bump in the night, maybe don't be so quick to be scared. It might just be your ghostly landlord reminding you to take out the trash or, for heaven's sake, turn down the music. Thanks for tuning in to our story today. If you enjoyed this peculiar tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the unknown. See you next time.